Item 6 is a request by Andrew Peters of Milestone Materials on behalf of landowner Christopher and Ann Donkers Trust. Applied for as an interim use permit for a gravel mining and crushing operation. Properties in section 26 of Northfield Township in the Ag zoning district. If there aren't any questions at this point, I'll go through a couple of photos and answer any questions after that. It's a fairly wide area view. You can see City of Northfield and Dundas, subject site to the southeast. A bit closer view of the site. A little bit closer view yet. So on the west side of the site is Keene Avenue, which is State Highway 246. Kind of in the middle of the property is a protected water course. They are required to stay back 300 feet from that through the rules. Most of the mining is proposed. So the open water area that you see is the area that had been mined in the past. The mining would extend to the north and west from that location.
So no mining they're proposing to the east of the creek?
No, they're not proposing any at this point. If they would want to at a later date or something, that would be a different interim use permit and would require they stay 300 feet away on the other side. Would also have to deal with a crossing at that point, which would probably be fairly complicated there. So here we're at the driveway into the site. The road that you see on the right is Highway 246. Again, we're looking out at some of the mining area. Just on the other side of the trees is that pond area and in the background there. Same location, looking kind of straight to the east. So again, most of the mining would be to the right of us in there. As I mentioned in the permit, there's concerns previously with an eagle's nest. You can actually see it in the background there. The applicants are proposing to stay the required distances away from that at this point. Again, along the driveway here, we're looking to the north. And across the roadway. This was on the back side of the site. So you'd mentioned the stream crossing that. The stream is just to the left of us in this photo. So we're kind of looking at the area, the stream, just kind of this wooded area with a pond and then the mining on the other side of that. So. This would be on the, let's see, the south side of the property. So there's a property line somewhere out in front of you there where there's one landowner to the right and then the mining to the left in this location. From that same location, again, looking to the north. So the access point proposed is the driveway we were previously on up there. Mining would be off to the right here. And that's it for the photos. Questions at all for staff?
Questions?
Yeah, I got two questions for you, Trent. First question, the enforcement of the 300-foot setback, is that by your guys' office or who enforces it?
That would be our office, and it has, it comes about because of our zoning ordinance not allowing interim or conditional use activities within 300 feet of a protected water course. So that's where, so it's not a setback, it's a restriction on the use within that distance, yes.
And I saw there was a big article about the truck traffic and the alternate routes. What is the plan for the truck traffic coming in and out?
So the applicant did submit a traffic study. Now that was based on, and the applicant can probably explain that better than I can. It's based on the activity that would be involved should they ever do an asphalt plant. That's not proposed at this point with this project, but the applicant stated that would be a much more intensive truck traffic, so they wanted to show that that would be suitable for that. And again, they can explain the details to that to you.
But the asphalt, if they did do an asphalt plant, they'd have to come back in front of us again.
Yes, yep, that's a separate permit. Yep.
Commissioner?
Trent, would you mind explaining the difference between an interim use permit and a conditional use permit?
So there's very little difference in how it's functioned in Rice County. Gravel mining operations were changed to an interim use permit just it was about a year ago or so. Previously, they were conditional use permits that had time limits in it. So there were some state changes though in some of the enabling legislation that counties have for doing zoning. Previously, we could have conditional use permits that had time limits to those. And with mining, they'd always had 5-year time limits is what we'd had with those. With that change in the legislation or the language authorizing us to do stuff, it needed to adjust it to an interim use permit if we were to have the time periods. So if it was a conditional use permit, we would not be, have the same options for limiting time that we have under an interim use permit. That kind of explain it a
Yes,
little bit?
it does, but does, no, that explains it. We still have the time limit, but do you have,
They otherwise function the same. They have conditions and, but the conditional use permit typically runs just with the land and goes, forever, where the interim use permit has a set end date to those. And
Right.
again, in these, it's a 5 year is what the
Right.
same as what we used to do with mining. Under the
but it
conditional-
does not carry with the land like conditional use permit does.
It does to the point of that time limit coming
Yes.
in. Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Applicant present. Name and address and
My name is Andrew Peters. I'm with Milestone Materials, 920 10th Avenue North in Onalaska, Wisconsin. Representing Chris and Ann Donkers, the property owners tonight. Kind of how we got here a little bit with some of what Trent pointed out. I wanted to cover real quick. And first off, Trent's staff report, fine, conditions fine. But the timeline is we had this property since 2003. We had permits in 2004, 2011 and 2016 to your interim conditional use terms. Came back in 2021 for the renewal. This commission suggested denial based on basically us not providing enough information as it pertained to waterway impacts and traffic. So at that time, we said we pulled the permit application to gather that information. And that's basically what this application has been put together to do. We've held this permit since 2003. We haven't changed any operations. The site plan from 2004 is in the application materials. It's the exact same plan. We dialed it up a little bit, but it's all the same. Just to explain those two items, I guess, first, the waterways, we were a little taken aback by it. It's just excavation of sand and gravel on site and crushing and processing. There's no pumping involved at all. And as Trent pointed out, we have the 300-foot setback from the waterway, so that's a protection. That's a local regulation. We also have intense state regulations with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency that require us to control all of our stormwater where we can and can't store fuel and how we store it to keep that in double wall tanks and secondary containment and keep it out of the floodway, et cetera, et cetera. Other best management practices for erosion control, things like that. Quarterly, monthly inspections, annual inspections. That's the kind of regulation of those waterways. We have to adhere to all those and comply with those in order to function. So one thing, for instance, that I did want to point out, it's just an example of such an action that we do plan to make a dike out there to separate ourselves from that 300-foot setback. If you saw that waterway, if you could bring up that photo, I can kind of show you quick, but we're going to construct a north-south berm as the first phase. Right about there, straight north and south-ish, right across the water, right outside the 300-foot setback. So that anything we're mining to the west of that 300-foot setback is going to, all that water is going to be separate from the existing pond. So that just so we can control that. And that again, isn't a zoning thing, but it's a MPCA stormwater type of effort that we just want to make sure that our stuff is separate from the existing water body. Secondly, to that traffic study and the infrastructure request, like that, it startled Trent when I said an asphalt plant traffic analysis, sorry. But when I was talking to Katie, the traffic engineer, I said, just max out at 400 trips per day so that, because aggregate will never reach that. So let's just do the study at every intersection, north and south, out of there off of State Highway 26 and max it out. And I don't want to mess up her words, just to read them here. In that worst case scenario, 400 trips, high level PM, peak hour traffic of 40 truck trips per hour all intersections will operate acceptably and no turn lanes would be required to accommodate the traffic. So, I mean, we thought that based on the state highway sizing and the intersections, but that validated that for us. And lastly, to the traffic, to address that, we also have a permit in hand from the Minnesota DOT to beef up that access. Driveway permit, we're gonna widen it out and we're actually gonna straighten up the approach a little bit to make it a little better driveway. So we have that permit in hand too, to get that access point to a much larger size. So that's those 2 points that were mentioned in the past, but one other thing I did want to mention quick, because dust did come up a lot and it has a couple times tonight. There was one added addition to our typical conditions. I saw Trent added, it's highlighted like 16, I think. Where our access road is going to have dust control. I mean, we're going to get regulated both by local, sorry, number 12 actually, to make sure our access drive is dust free. Calcium chloride treatment if needed, but we have a fleet of water trucks that go to all of our sites and keep them watered, but we'll be regulated by Rice County on that driveway for dust. Secondly, all of our operations, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, again, any processing operations are stringently watched over and permitted. All of our crushers have to have, well, first off, the aggregates have to remain moist. They have to be spray bars on equipment to make sure they're wet when they're being processed to a certain degree. The crusher is underneath that air emissions permit as well, and that has to adhere to a certain dust-free limit. Any transfer points off of conveyors onto stockpiles, conveyor to conveyor, those things are also all regulated to be dust-free within that permit. And also the fugitive dust on site from like loader traffic and things like that are also regulated by that permit. So there's a lot of things in place for waterway protection and dust control, and that we feel are adequately addressing some of the concerns that came up a few years ago. And just lastly, to wrap up, like I said, we've been at this for 20 years. Our business is based on typically months and years. A lot of times it's years and decades. We've maintained our permits out here for 20 years, renegotiated leases, you name it, inspections quarterly, done whatever we had to because this is a huge resource for us. We feel like we've preserved it by continuing to keep these things all above board and keep everything clean and working out there. It's a long-term resource with exceptional sand and gravel. It's only 12 acres. It might not seem like much, but there's some really good road building materials there that we would really appreciate being able to get at. With that, if you have any other questions, let me know. We got a team, people here too, if there's some things I can't answer. So.
Any questions now of the applicant?
Not yet.
No. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We will open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to speak on this, remember name and address, 3-minute time limit too, please.